I said at the start of the program today that, and we've tried to get the foodstuffs and other great grocery conglomerate on. It's a good day to be discussing monopolies in this country and monopoly cartels, given that the latest Horizon Research survey has shown that there are 5 major sectors of the New Zealand economy in which the free market certainly does not operate in any way in which we would consider the free market to operate. That's to do with domestic aviation, it's to do with supermarkets, it's to do with banks, and it's to do with petrol companies. Sorry, there are 4, aren't there? I'm sure we could come up with a 5th, but it doesn't matter. Those are the 4 big ones. But one of those is groceries. The supermarkets are seen as the least competitive. And there have been and perhaps because there's a degree of trust that the supermarket chains have lost with the average Kiwi, that there is a not much sympathy for the chains themselves when they complain about things that are going wrong. So whether it's getting theft on a grand scale, whether it's the abuse of staff, it would be another good example, or whether there is just general assaults, indeed, against staff who are working in retail areas and supermarkets. It's certainly become a much more dangerous place to play. As a general rule, and this is why we're going to be talking to our next guest, Rod Hughes, in just a second. As a general rule, supermarket workers are not at the upper echelon of payment in this country. And I would imagine the minimum wage is probably the default payment in that particular industry, and yet it's an industry that makes literally hundreds of millions of profit each year. And the question now is raised, are they responsible corporate citizens, not just for the prices they might charge consumers, but in the ways in which they look after their staff? Rod Hughes from the First Union, ask Rod there, joins us now. Rod, what's the actual union that you work for, mate?
We're called First Union. We cover off finance, industry, retail, service and transport, amongst some other things as well.
Listen, just before we start talking about this case in specific, I'm really interested to know the position of trade unions now. They used to be all powerful once, as we all know, and then along came the Employment Contracts Act. And the First Union, if I'm a retail worker, let's just say I'm working at a supermarket, do I join you, or can I join you and a whole series of other people as well?
Well, there's no stopping freedom of association. We are the union for supermarkets. And basically the big retail stores, so Bunnings, Mitre 10, Farmers, all those, we have members in all of those major national brands.
So it's still voluntary membership, right, of trade unions?
Absolutely, yeah.
And
actually, that's not a bad thing, because what you want is people who want to belong to the union, not because they have to belong.
Oh, listen, that's a refreshing view to hear. Can I then ask how many people would be in your union? Do you keep numbers or percentages?
Overall we've got about 31,000 members.
Oh, wow.
In terms of that's that's across the whole union. In retail, we've got close to 15,000. Okay,
that's a lot of people. So I guess the average person would, as a member of your union, would be likely to be a full-time employee who's a bit older, say someone like me. Your sort of casual employees still at school probably won't join. Is that right?
Actually, you'd be surprised. In terms of retail, there's a lot of casualisation of labour. We do take on casual, employees. There's a lot of short hours given as well, and those people sign up as well. So, in terms of full-time employees, we don't have as many as you would think. And actually, what we're finding is a lot of younger people signing up over the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, and I guess the other thing I'd ask is it a percentage of my wages I pay to you, or is it a flat fee?
It's a flat fee, but it varies between on the number of hours that you work. Obviously, if someone's working, 16 hours a week, they're not going to be paying anywhere near as much as a full-time employee. We think that that's fair.
All right. Now, as you would have heard my introduction as to the role of supermarkets in this country, they have been subject of Commerce Commission. In fact, they still are. They've got their own grocery commissioner now, appointment set up by the last government to acknowledge in large point public concern about the activities and particularly the commercial operations of supermarkets in this country. Yeah. But at the same time, certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, and it seems to be escalating, there have been continual incidents involving staff, theft, assaults, abuse, which seems to be almost de rigueur in certain parts of this country. What are you finding as a trade union leader and a representative of these staff? What are the concerns largely you have?
Well, the concerns are massive, and we have been working quite closely with the major chains to try to ameliorate that kind of massive increase in the crime. And I'll just give you some brief stats. Now, this is an Australian study because we haven't had the same kind of quality of study done in New Zealand, but it is from Woolworths, so it is the same company that work here. 87% of people have experienced verbal abuse in the last year. 12.5% have experienced customer violence. 17% have experienced sexual abuse, and 9% have experienced spitting. So that's just. If you imagine if you went to work every day and you were going to get verbally abused. Well, actually, sometimes Michael, you might get verbally abused.
You're asking the wrong person.
But for most people, that's not the everyday, experience in their job. And customer violence. I mean, it must be quite frightening for a lot of our members. What we get is our members are scared, frustrated, and demoralised. Spitting has become basically a violent act in the age of COVID. And the company's own, the Woolworths company's own statistics are absolutely frightening. In the last 5 years, they've gone from 60 physical assaults a year to 230. From 100 security incidents to 780, and theft, of course, is a major problem for them, which has trebled, and that's a cost that will probably get passed on to the customer.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, look, we're horrified by what's going on, and there are. And to be fair, certainly in the area of Woolworths and foodstuffs, they are trying to put stuff in place to kind of hold this stuff, but it's epidemic at the moment.
There must be. Listen, I live in a very, very safe, secure part of the country. I live in central Otago. All right, so everybody's got a job here, Rudd. And there is probably a fair amount of what we call social cohesion. And because we live in a small communities, we tend to have a sort of a personal relationship with the supermarket workers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would imagine, I can't imagine that too many of those incidents occur here. I'll come to that in a second. But where are there particular hotspots of New Zealand where this problem is endemic or worse than others?
Oddly enough, it's spread right throughout the country. I think Central Otago will be an exception, but even in some of those smaller rural communities, we're getting very high incidences of crime. The company has a risk matrix that Woolworths, and of the 196 stores that they have, 98 are viewed as either high risk or very high risk.
Wow!
So that's a hell of a lot of stores.
That's half of them. Yeah.
That's right. And so this is absolutely widespread. There are pockets where the rate of offending is much higher, but even so, it's still pretty much widely spread throughout the country.
Now, I might be slightly prejudiced here, but you tell me if I am. I would imagine that the greater the incidents would be in areas of what you call high socioeconomic deprivation. Would I probably be there, right, in terms of that risk index?
You would be absolutely wrong.
You're joking?
In fact, no. So we've had a number of major incidents in Ponsonby. Ponsonby is my local, and I've been in there, and you see this verbal abuse. Any amount of times, it seems like it's kind of par for the course. Point Chevalier, which is a reasonably well-to-do area. It doesn't seem to matter about the socioeconomic area it's in. It seems to be across the board.
Why? Why are your staff 87% of them being verbally abused? What are the triggers?
So I think there's an element of there's a lack of social cohesion, as you were talking about. One of the things we're looking at is adopting an Australian campaign that says nobody deserves a serve. Which is having some effect in Australia. We're talking with Woolworths about introducing this. And it's about identifying the store workers as people and members of the community. You're right that they're relatively low waged. Where they're unionised, heavily unionised, the wages are much better than minimum wage. But they're not, they're certainly not going to be retiring anytime soon. And so, that's one of the worst, that's one of the kind of major reasons for it. The other one, I think, is there is in terms of theft, there's a cost of living crisis that hasn't gone away. I think that's being dealt with. But there is also stealing to order.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a little, on the increase. It seems to be a kind of constellation of things. It's not any one thing.